You'll never recover financially from this, my husband sneered, dropping the divorce papers on my hospital tray. I was lying in a thin medical gown, hooked up to an IV after emergency surgery, while he stood over me in a tailored suit bought with my hard work. He truly believed he was stripping me of everything, demanding the marital home, the luxury SUV, and full control of our joint accounts. He looked at me like I was a broken, helpless charity case. What he didn't know was that while he thought I was just an army officer living off a modest military salary of $7,000 a month, I'd spent 6 years silently building a private defense consulting firm. My real income? $680,000 a year. He thought he was throwing me to the wolves. He had no idea he was handing me the key to my absolute freedom. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can welcome you to the channel. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 32 years old, and up until that freezing Tuesday morning, I actually thought marriage meant through sickness and in health. I woke up from emergency abdominal surgery, my vision blurry and my throat raw from the breathing tube. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically in the sterile hospital room. But instead of a loving husband holding my hand, I opened my eyes to find Mark standing over my bed, wearing a sharp, tailored suit bought with my hard work. He wasn't holding flowers. He was holding a thick legal folder. Without a single word of comfort, without asking if I was in pain, he dropped the folder right onto my bedside food tray. "You'll never recover financially from this," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "I filed for divorce. I'm keeping the house and the SUV. He stood there with his arms crossed, looking down at me in my thin medical gown like I was a broken, useless piece of trash. He went on to explain, with absolute satisfaction, that he was cutting me off from our joint accounts immediately. He told me I was a financial burden, someone who'd starve in the real world without his guidance. He even bragged that he was moving on with someone who actually fitted his social status, a woman who didn't spend her life in military fatigues. He truly believed he was leaving me with nothing, casting me out into the cold to drown. To understand how Mark became so blindingly arrogant, you have to go back 3 years. At the time, I was an active-duty Army logistics officer. On paper, I brought home roughly $7,000 a month. To Mark, who earned a mid-level corporate salary, my military income was just a cute little contribution to the household, a modest paycheck he loved to bring up whenever we were around his friends. "Rachel does her little part," he'd chuckle at dinner parties, patting my hand condescendingly while I sat quietly in my uniform. "It's basic military pay, but hey, at least it keeps her occupied." He built his entire ego around the idea that he was the primary breadwinner, the strategic financial mind of our family. I let him believe it because, frankly, I cared more about peace in my marriage than feeding my own ego. But what Mark didn't realize was that my military career had gifted me with an extraordinarily rare set of skills in global supply chain optimization and defense logistics. 6 years ago, I quietly launched a private defense consulting firm. Working late nights, weekends, and every spare hour I had, I built a client base of international contractors and government agencies. By the time Mark was standing over my hospital bed, my private LLC was generating $680,000 a year. Because of strict corporate structures and my desire to protect my assets from his reckless spending, I kept my business entirely separate. My real income went directly into private corporate accounts he didn't even know existed. He thought he was married to a humble soldier living paycheck to paycheck. He had no idea he was sleeping next to a multimillionaire in the making. Looking back, the signs of Mark's betrayal had been staring me in the face for months. It started with subtle financial abuse, unexplained withdrawals from our joint checking account, sudden business trips on weekends, and credit card statements filled with charges at high-end boutiques where I'd never stepped foot. Whenever I questioned him about the missing money, he'd scoff and remind me that since he was the real earner in the house, he didn't need my permission to spend. Then came the mistress. Her name was Vanessa, a high-maintenance socialite who frequented the same country club Mark desperately tried to belong to. Mark had convinced her that he was the sole financial engine behind our lifestyle, a wealthy executive bogged down by a boring military wife. Vanessa didn't want Mark for his personality. She wanted the polished life she thought he owned. She was eager to step into my home, drive my SUV, and live off the fortune she believed he built. What neither of them realized was that the lavish lifestyle Mark bragged about was entirely subsidized by me. I paid the heavy down payment on the house. I made the bulk auto draft payments for the SUV. They saw a defenseless woman in a hospital gown, easy prey to be stripped clean. But as I stared at those divorce papers, I felt no tears. I felt a cold, crystal-clear focus. I decided right then not to fight for the physical assets. I would let Mark have everything he demanded on paper, setting the ultimate financial trap. 2 days after being discharged from the hospital, I sat in the glass-walled conference room of my divorce attorney, Sarah. She looked at the settlement proposal Mark had drafted and slammed her pen onto the table, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Rachel, this is absolute robbery," Sarah insisted, leaning across the table. "He's demanding the 4-bedroom house, the luxury SUV, and full possession of all joint liquid accounts. You paid for almost all of it. We can take this to court, drag it out, and fight for every single dime. You have a solid case." I looked out the window, completely calm. "I don't want to fight for the house or the car, Sarah. Let him have them." "Are you insane?" she gasped. "He's trying to leave you destitute." "Only on paper," I replied softly, a subtle smile touching my lips. "I'll sign whatever he wants under one non-negotiable condition. In exchange for me surrendering all claims to the marital home, the SUV, and the joint accounts, Mark must sign an absolute, irrevocable financial waiver. He waives all rights to any present or future business assets, private accounts, corporate equity, or spousal support from me, effective immediately." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to slow, calculating realization. She quickly drafted the clause into the final agreement. When Mark and his attorney met us to sign the final papers, Mark couldn't hide his smug grin. He practically snatched the pen to sign his name, convinced he'd just bankrupted his naive military wife. He looked at me with smug pity as he pushed the agreement across the table. He thought he was taking everything I had. He had no idea he was signing away his only lifeline to the millions he was about to desperately need. Mark was so eager to flaunt his newfound victory that just 3 days after the divorce decree was signed, he married Vanessa. They threw an extravagant, fast-tracked backyard wedding at the house, filling the property with high-end catering, expensive champagne, and socialite guests. Mark paid for the entire spectacle using high-interest credit cards, completely convinced that he now owned a multi-million-dollar estate and that his financial future was fully secure. What Mark failed to realize was that the illusion of his wealth was sustained entirely by my behind-the-scenes management. On the 4th day, the trap snapped shut. The automated reevaluations from the financial institutions kicked in. Without my knowledge or signature, the bank reclassified the marital home. Mark had assumed he was inheriting equity, but he didn't realize I had restructured the home's financing months prior, triggering a massive $120,000 balloon payment upon any transfer of ownership. At the exact same time, I officially removed my name from the luxury SUV loan. Because Mark's individual credit score was abysmal and his corporate income was mediocre, the auto lender immediately flagged the account, demanding an instant full balance settlement or immediate repossession. On top of that, I officially closed all joint credit lines and transferred my private corporate capital into encrypted standalone business accounts. Mark woke up on the morning after his honeymoon night thinking he was the king of the world. In reality, He was standing on a crumbling mountain of debt, holding the keys to a house he couldn't afford, a vehicle about to be seized, and a brand new, high-maintenance wife who had no idea he was completely broke. The dominoes were falling, and Mark was about to get a very expensive reality check. I was sitting on the balcony of my new high-rise penthouse overlooking the city, sipping black coffee, when my phone started vibrating relentlessly. I looked down at the screen. It was Mark. I let it ring 4 times before finally pressing answer. "Rachel, what the hell did you do?" Mark's voice screamed through the speaker, completely stripped of his usual arrogant composure. He sounded hysterically panicked. "Good morning, Mark," I replied, keeping my tone smooth and icy. "Is there a problem?" "A problem?" he shrieked. "The bank just froze the house accounts. They're telling me there's a $120,000 balloon payment due in 14 days, or they're starting foreclosure. And 2 tow trucks are sitting outside right now trying to repossess the SUV. Vanessa is screaming at me. You need to call your bank and fix this accounting error right now." I took a slow sip of coffee, enjoying the absolute terror in his voice. "It's not an accounting error, Mark. You wanted the house, the car, and the joint debt. You signed the papers. They're entirely yours now." "I can't pay this," he roared. "I only make $80,000 a year. How was I supposed to know you were quietly paying off all these balances?" "Because you were too arrogant to look," I said softly. "You thought I was just living off a $7,000 a month military salary. You had no idea I own a private defense consulting firm that clears $680,000 a year." The phone went dead silent. The sound of his rapid breathing was the only thing filling the line. $600,000? He stammered out, his voice cracking. "Rachel, please. We were married for 5 years. You have to help me pay this off." "Read the divorce agreement, Mark," I replied coldly. "You waived every single right to my business and assets. You'll never recover financially from this. Goodbye." I hung up, blocked his number, and enjoyed the quiet morning view. The fall from grace for Mark and Vanessa was swift and public. Unable to secure a loan for the $120,000 balloon payment, Mark was forced to put the house on the market in a desperate fire sale, losing nearly all the equity he had fought so hard to steal. The luxury SUV was repossessed right off the driveway in front of all his neighbors. Within 2 months, the mountain of unpayable debt forced Mark to file for personal bankruptcy. Vanessa, realizing that the wealthy executive lifestyle she had been promised was nothing more than a hollow illusion, filed for divorce shortly after, taking whatever little dignity he had left. Mark was left living in a tiny 1-bedroom rental apartment, his credit score ruined, and his reputation in tatters. As for me, I officially retired from active military duty and transitioned full-time into running my consulting firm. Free from the anchor of a toxic marriage, my business flourished beyond expectation. I purchased a stunning seaside home, invested heavily in my future, and dedicated a portion of my income to funding legal defense programs for women facing financial control and abuse in toxic relationships. Looking back at that morning in the hospital room, I realized that Mark thought he was delivering my death sentence. In reality, his greed was the best thing that ever happened to me. He tried to bury me, but he didn't realize I was a seed. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have revealed your true income during the marriage, or kept it a secret until the end? Let me know in the comments below.